So now we have the basics of how to rotate our player to the mouse. What we're going to do from here is we're going to set them up so that we can actually move around using either a gamepad or WASD. Now in this situation, what I need to do is go to my project settings, which is under Edit, Project Settings, and then go down to Input. From within Input, you'll see that we have action mappings and axis mappings. And much like the previous project, we're going to be looking at why we want to add it to a specific category. In this situation, we want to do an axis mapping because we're basing it around movement. And I'll show you why. So add an axis mapping. And I'm going to set this to be called up. And initially, I'm going to make the up to be set to W. Now this is going to have a scale of 1, and the reason for that is I'm going to add another one, which is going to be S, which we're going to use for down. And the reason we're adding the downwards movement to the up axes is because down is actually upwards in a negative direction. So the scale is going to be -1. So that way they're working on the same axes but going different directions. And the cool part of this is, in theory, if you wanted to add joystick support, you would actually only need to have a gamepad left thumbstick y-axis, and it would automatically read in the scale according to which direction the thumbstick was facing. So the y-axis refers to the up and down on the thumbstick. Now in this situation, I'm going to add another axis mapping, which is going to be referred to as right, and I'm going to make this bound to D. And as you may have already guessed, we're going to be binding A to be negative right. So left is the opposite of right. So I've gone A, and I'm setting the scale to be -1. Now again, if you wanted to add gamepad support, all you would need to do would be gamepad left thumbstick x-axis, and that's all you would have to do, and that would now support it on that section. So we've added that. Now let's open up our player controller. So within the player controller, we're going to be setting up the binds, and as I mentioned earlier, the player controller is essentially the brain passing information to the pawn, which is the body. So in this situation, what we're going to do is we're going to right click and we're going to go input up, and you'll see that we have axis events input up. So I'm going to get this, and what I'm going to do is, first off, I'm going to add the ability to move the pawn. So I'm going to get my pawn by doing get controlled pawn. And I'm quickly going to check if that's valid or not. So I'm just seeing, do I actually have a body? And if I do, so if the is valid is true, I'm going to then go ahead and do add movement input, which means we're going to tell the pawn to move in a specific direction. But you've got to think about this. Which direction do we actually want to move them? Well, we want to move up to be upwards relative to the camera, which means that if we go ahead and we get the camera, so we can actually get the camera by getting get player camera manager within the player controller down the bottom here. Be careful you don't do the get player camera manager that is the function under player. We want to get this one with the little blue icon next to it. So I'm going to get that, and I'm just going to say from the get camera manager, if I type in the words up vector, I can get the up vector of the camera, which means get the direction that upwards is. And if you remember how the camera is set up, because it's looking down at the player, up is going to be up on the screen, which is what we want to have. So all I need to do now is plug this into the direction and this into the scale. I'm now going to quickly do almost the exact same thing. So I'm going to copy all of this except the input. I'm going to duplicate it by hitting Control W, and I'm now going to go input right, and this is going to be plugged in here with the axis value plugged in here. However, instead of the up vector, this is going to be right vector. So that gives us the direction in a particular with a particular scale assigned to it. And now, if we look at how that's set up in game, if I hit play, I can rotate with my mouse and W, S, A, D. So it all works perfectly. And we're all set up. And that's all it takes. So now that we've added movement, we're going to quickly add one additional thing, which is the ability to jump. Now we've already set this up in the Anim blueprint, so all we need to do is go back to our project settings, then into input. This time, instead of adding an axis mapping, we're going to be adding an action mapping, because we don't actually need an axis value with jumps. Now you could potentially set this up as some sort of axis mapping, if you wanted to have, say, a jetpack or something. with limited jump abilities that were being bound together. I'm not quite sure how you'd want it set up, but in this instance, we're going to just set it up as an action because we really just want you to hit the button and you to just launch in the air. So I'm going to go jump, and I'm going to set this to be the spacebar. And now within my player controller, I'm going to then simply go, if they say jump, get the controlled pawn. And now we can't call jump on it. And the reason that we can't call jump on it is because jump isn't built into pawn. However, it is built into character. So I'm going to get my pawn, and I'm going to cast it to a character. And then as a character, if I type in the word jump, you see that we now have this available here. And if I hit compile and save, our character is now able to jump. And she will correctly play the jump in and jump out animations. Now one thing that is happening here, you'll notice, is that as she jumps in the air, notice we're getting a bit of a pop on her arms. So the reason we're getting that pop in her arms is because we need to go into the animation blueprint. So I'm going to go Content Browser, and I'm going to go to my assets and open up the animation blueprint. And in the jump mid state, so that's available from here, I'm going to open up the jump mid state. You'll see that we're currently telling it to play the falling animation. However, the falling animation is set to loop. Instead, I want this to play, and then at the end of it, stop looping. So once I've checked that box, and I hit jump, you'll see that her arms are no longer popping out. So they still go out, but they're no longer doing that weird little pop as the animation attempted to loop. And that's it. That's all it took. Jump set up, movement set up. Let's move on to the next stuff.